Hello, world. This is the Brother to Brother Show. I'm your host, K-Mo. Thank you for taking this journey with us with real men, real problems, real solutions. Let's go. All right. Welcome back to the Brother to Brother Show. I'm your host, K-Mo. And I'm here today with a good friend of mine, somebody I've known for quite some time. She goes by the name of Nicole. And so Nicole is an alpha woman, and she thinks that she's in quotes alpha woman. But I'm gonna let her talk a little bit about herself. But today's topic, before we go into that, is how alpha women's behavior has been taken, has not been taken over a man's masculinity. So how those characteristics have not, overpowered or taken over a man's masculinity. So I thought this is a good conversation to have, especially during this time, and especially when we're talking about just where we are in life right now. And so she agreed to have this conversation over me pressing a couple times, and she said, absolutely. But I'm going to let her say a little bit about herself, but I'll start off and she can continue though. But she is a career woman. She is a mother. She is a wife. And then I'm going to go ahead and let Nicole finish that up for me.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here. So yes. And actually, when you asked me about the topic, I wouldn't necessarily say that I consider myself an alpha woman, but I know people assign me to that. And it's interesting because when you put the topic out there, I actually went and Googled it. I was like, well, what are the characteristics of an alpha woman? And I think I remember sending it back to you in a text like, oh yeah, okay, that is me. So I didn't typically assign myself to it, which was interesting. But when I went and read through it, I was kind of like, okay, that makes sense.
Right.
And then what I was more willing to talk about it because you talk about the fact of like how do you not allow those characteristics to overshadow your partner or overshadow anyone else that might be around you, but particularly as it pertains to your partner. I think that's why I don't view myself as an alpha female,
right?
Because I don't let it take over,
right,
who I am in my relationship.
So now before you get in, don't get into that question yet. Before you get into that question, no. What are some of those? Because I don't want us to not target or like really for our listeners not focus on what you said at the beginning, which was what were some of those characteristics that either your friends have said or what you like found when you discovered what an alpha woman really was.
Yeah, I think it's a drive, kind of ambitious, like a passion to be a leader, to be at the top. Sometimes noted as maybe a negative thing, but like aggressive, right? You never want to necessarily think of women as aggressors, but it is a trait, right? As a part of being an alpha person. I think those are the ones that I probably prescribed to or I aligned to as I was reading them. But I'm sure there are many other traits. But those are the ones that I think pop out to me as, somebody that's strong-willed, somebody that has a presence. Those would be the things that I think kind of resonate when I think about the alpha. And again, I read that definition a long time ago. But
okay.
That's what I think of.
So before we go into our next question, can we take another stab at this one? Have you been in a situation professionally or personally where you've seen an alpha woman in a negative light and you was like, that is not me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give an example about that?
I've seen that where, I actually see that now in terms of leadership that I have around me, where they're very strong and confident and passionate about their opinion and their objectives, or not their objectives, but their perspective. And it clouds their ability to listen and to hear and to take feedback and to take input. And so any input or thoughts or ideas or decisions that come from outside of their perspective get shot down. So you see a lot of times where leaders, and let's just say woman to woman, right, or alpha woman to whoever, where it's a no, right, and sometimes a lot of times the characteristic that's said is you're defensive. I've also seen where it's been played on me, right? So my management chain, my male management chain tells me, right, when he gives me feedback and being an alpha person, right, I'm going to take that in and I'm going to respond based on what I just said because I have my own perspective.
Right.
And I say, well, hey, I think about what you just said this, and this way. And the response is, you're being defensive. Like literally in a one-on-one with my management, that was the response, that I was being defensive. From my perspective, I was actually just sharing my opinion. But alpha female traits are not always taken well by other individuals because we're supposed to be seen as like, submissive to women.
Okay.
So I think that it creates challenges in corporate environment, definitely does. And I've definitely seen it play out in examples. I've been a part of them where it's either been me being the recipient or I've seen alpha female traits applied to others. So yeah, definitely see that.
Okay. So I'm going to add 3 things to this one. So the next question is, I'm trying to choose my words very, very careful here. How's that different than being a feminist as opposed to alpha woman? Or is there a difference? And if there is, because in my mind, when I'm thinking about it, right, I can say that my mom probably was an alpha female. My grandmother was an alpha female. And I don't look at them as totally negative, but I think they have some challenges in their personal lives. And that's why I have you here talking about, this situation, especially when it has to do with relationships. But what does that look like too, than the strong women? So you have strong women, you have alpha women, and you have feminists. Do you think that those are all different things or they can all be included in one? I know I just said a mouthful.
Different. I think that they're different. I definitely think that it depends on, the viewpoint that someone's looking at. So, for example, if we take some of the traits, right? Strong, somebody that has an opinion or is comfortable in giving a directive. The other side of that, right? If somebody doesn't view those alpha female traits as positive, the negative to that is strong equals aggressive, directive equals bossy. But it really depends on how you're going to receive. Well, actually, let me take that back. How the alpha female is delivering her traits, right, or wearing them, and then additionally how the person received it. And the challenge, I think, for alpha females is it's acceptable for alpha males. We have to work harder to not let those traits come off negative because they're positive. They're good traits to have, right? They're great when we're talking about men. Everyone thinks that they're awesome with he's an alpha male. He gets something. But when it comes to an alpha female, it's not viewed as positively. So the challenge that we have as women, because I don't think being an alpha female makes you a feminist. I don't think being a feminist makes you an alpha female. But we have to continually explain why I am the way that I am, instead of you just kind of being able to be strong, passionate, directed, confident, etc.
Okay. Because I would, from a personal standpoint, I would look at it as well. I think there are strong women or women who have a strong opinion, and women who are very strong, and they may not be alpha, and they may not be alpha females, right? So, and I think all those things can be positive. Do you feel, this is a different topic? Well, it goes to this, but how are you able to you know, you've been married for quite some time. How are you able to bring that home every day? Because I hear a lot of issues with my guy friends who have had issues with women who, may not call themselves alpha females, right? But they may not know how to turn that off once you get home.
Yeah. So I think I had benefits from the way that I was raised, as well as benefits from how my union came together that I think helped with that. So I'll flip those two. So when it comes to how I was raised, my mother was always what I would say very strong. So like you said, she was strong, she was confident, she had poise, she owned a room, and she had all of those things, right? But when it came to being at home, she took on the responsibilities inside and outside of the house, but I grew up in a home with stepfather, but allowed my stepfather to also drive many of those aspects as well. And the reason I'm pausing is because I'm actually thinking about what I was about to say. Sounded like I was going to put them in general assignments. It's like that may not come out the right way, but they had I'll put it this way, they had a very good balance, and they both knew how to play their roles in terms of what was needed for the family. So, and I didn't recognize all of this until I started my own. So when I think about what their picture looked like, at times one person was my mom might have been the breadwinner and my stepdad wasn't. And then later on it flipped, where he was the breadwinner and she was. But that was acceptable. And you never heard anything from either to expose the other. Now, I didn't understand that at that time until as I got older, I started to understand how much money each of them made. And as I thought back to my childhood and saw how they moved together, right, I started to connect the dots as I got older. There was always a respect in our household for how they dealt and managed with each other, both in the good and the bad. My parents didn't have a problem showing us the challenges that they had, or us seeing them and us hearing about them. It was a pretty open household to hearing arguments, and then also hearing the wins, right? And so I think the foundation of my mom and who she was as being a strong-willed person that was very confident, I think instilled a lot of that in me. So fast forward to my relationship, I think a big part of it, and where I would tell you that I play more of my alpha traits, I think I'm a little bit of a chameleon, right? I'm more of an alpha at work, but when it comes to professional, than I am at home.
Right. So let's go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, stay on that for a second, because that's what I hear a lot in the complaint I get a lot from my guy friends is, and I'm going to actually have a podcast about this too. They always complain about they are treated like kings. I'm using the word king very loosely, right? But they're treated with respect. They treated a certain way when at work. But when they go home, it's more so like, hey, you're the help almost. And that doesn't mean it's a negative connotation, but you're almost not treated in the same manner. How are you able to get that into gear? How are you able to, for me knowing you for over 10 years, right? How were you able to learn that? How were you able, because even when I've known you and you've talked about certain things in relationships or whatnot, you've always kind of been that same type of person. But, talk a little bit about what you took away from your mother, what you took away from those situations that you've had in the past to make you into that person. Doesn't mean it's perfect, right? But what was it? Give our listeners and hopefully female listeners can really understand what they need to do so that they can understand how to go about making some of those changes. And this is not a bash, right? Not a bash on women, not a bash on men. It's just more understanding, because a lot of people just don't know, right? I had to go through it and understand, like that book, Think Like a Man. I also will tell my friends, you need to think like a woman, right? Think like a woman to understand what she wants too, because we do that a lot. We're just pushing it on a woman, much of the times. And we do a lot of pushing on a man at times too. But in this case, in this particular situation, with leaving it at work. How do you go about doing that? What conditioned you? What made you feel that way, and what did you pick up on?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things outside of my foundation of my parents, which I just mentioned, is the communication between me and my husband. So, and I think a lot of breakdowns in marriages is because the communication isn't there. And communication is multifaceted. I think a lot of times people think communication as I told somebody something and I got out what I needed to get out. But communication, it's like a continuous process of I said something, it was received, I listened, and then I acted, right? And then after I acted, I evaluated what happened, and then I communicated again to say, did that work? Yes or no? If yes, great, let's keep doing it. If no, how do we fix it? Communication cycle starts all over again. And so the biggest thing that I think was we sat down and talked about it. And so when I was saying earlier, I have the benefit of my foundation and then I have the benefit of my marriage. We both happened to work in the same company. So we both understood the culture of the company in which we worked. And we know that alpha personalities soar in our company. So we understood that we were both alpha. Like we got two of us. And so knowing that, we talked about it, right? And a lot of the alpha traits he loved about me, right? When we started dating, it was, these are the things I love about you. And when I go look at the definition, it was a check, check, check. He loved my alpha traits. But we also knew that alpha people together can be a challenge.
Yeah.
So we literally sat and talked about it. And a big part of it was, don't bring work home, right? Like when we talk and when we're talking about things, we know work is stressful. Don't bring it home, right? Home life is home life. We talked about our role, right? How we wanted to function as a unit. We talked a lot about if we have issues, that we need to talk about issues. We also said we wanted to do counseling before we needed counseling. We were like, we don't want to go sit into it and talk to a counselor
when the issues are already there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that was learned from, prior experiences. So we didn't just come up with this stuff like
right.
Geniuses, right? It was like we learned about these things, we got feedback from other people. And so a big part of it is the communication and the support model that we provide to each other, and understanding that communication means you might not always like what I have to tell you. There have been some knockdown, drag out conversations, but the value of those or what I say the premise to having those conversations needs to be is that you have to be able to lay it out on the table, because you know that to only get to the crux of the issue and to make it better is to talk about what hurts. And so I think a big part of it has been us kind of aligning and communicating and talking to each other. And then in that, the foundation of what I knew and what I saw, that it's okay to be submissive. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to shut off some of those traits. And so we've gone into roles. We've understood how we have to shift at different times in our roles, right? Where, back to the model I told you with my mom, right? Sometimes somebody's making more money than the other. Sometimes somebody's not. Yeah, but it's talking about that. That was a challenge for us in our relationship when that flipped a little bit, right? When the script flipped in terms of, maybe the woman making more. And I know this is open and honest, transparent conversation. So, right. And we noticed that was creating a gap between us. Right. So we had to sit down and talk about it instead of letting it, create other issues, within us. So I think the biggest thing to the question is, I think the biggest thing is the communication. If as a man, if you feel like you're not getting that level of respect, or the traits are starting to, create issues for you guys, communicate about it. And then for the woman, it's the same thing, right? Communicating about, you don't have to turn off all the traits. You have to manage them.
So with that management, right? Like, I'm thinking about from a man's point of view, and I usually have men on, but I definitely need to have women on, because I wanted to make sure that it's not just coming from one side, or it's my side. But I really want you to kind of dive into, like, how, with you knowing how a man operates, how he feels, and things of that nature. How do you still allow him? Because we're talking about masculinity, right? How do you not take over that masculinity? Like, how do you not take over his being a king, his being a like, quote, I'm using the word quote unquote man. A lot of people can use that word. Some women like, well, be a man, and like, I'm using man in the sense of making him feel, stroking his ego, building him up, the support, things of that nature, to uplift him, and some of the things that may be old fashioned or what we might have seen growing up. But how do you not still keep your, womanhood, feeling like a woman, feeling like you're supporting those things, but how do you also make him feel like he's not losing that or stripping him away from that, especially in the world that we live in, and when things aren't as black and white as they once were?
I think the reason I'm almost, in a sense, struggling to answer is because it feels so natural. So I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I explain the natural, right? It's like, because to me, so let me see. I think you might remember this. One of the acronyms that I live by is LUVAM, right? And the acronym LUVAM is, I'm going to let you be a man, right? So sometimes when I catch myself not allowing him to be the king, the head of the household, I have to tell myself, oh, you need LUVAM. I actually, just earlier today, we were downstairs, and I was like, I got a LUVAM. Because I was trying to check him on going to do something that I thought should have been done at 9. And before so I said it once, right? And I said, hey, are you gonna, X, Y, Z? And he was doing some other things. And to be fair, right, he was juggling the kids while I was working, but I still thought that this thing needed to be done at 9. And so I said, hey, are you gonna do X, Y, Z? And he said, I'm dealing with the kids, blah, blah, blah. 30 minutes went by, and I was going to tell him again. And I said, I need to LUVAM. Like, he's doing something, like, leave it alone. So I think one of the ways that I do that is, if I catch myself creeping up to do that, I check myself with my acronym. But
how do you even get to that point? How do you even get to that point, though, Nicole?
I'm just going to say, I think the most important thing for us is to recognize what being a man means to your man, because everyone's thing is not the same. The things that would trigger my husband that don't make him feel like a king may not be the same things that would trigger you or somebody else.
I would say this, though, that situation you just said, right? I always believe men are dogs and women. I think for most people, I have heard this from a lot of different dudes. Like, I'm using the example of the trash can, right? Take the trash out. They feel like you need to take the trash out right now. And the dude is like, oh, I'll take it out a little bit later. In his mind, he knows he needs to take the trash out, but you wanted to be done right now. And so I've heard that from I'm sure you have too, from my great uncle who's dead, from my mother's generation, from my generation on. Like, so that's something from what you just described just now. It may be something slightly different, but you asking a man to do something and he's like, I'm gonna do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you want it done right now. So, like, that type of thing. I think some things are just, no matter what the man or the one, I just feel like some things are just norms, right? Women just want done and men just want done. It may be different in situations, right? But that's not something that I don't hear often, you know?
But it's the same thing for women, right? And so, that's why I think it has to be something that is, you have to understand the triggers or the values or the things that are impactful for your person, right? Because they are not the same. And the challenge is, if you take what your ex made him feel like a king, and you try to bring that into this relationship,
right.
Those two people may really not be the same. So, and that goes back to the communication.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand your partner's love language.
Right.
You have to understand, what your partner wants and needs in order to feel like that.
Right.
For example, my husband's an acts of service kind of guy,
right.
and he's a quality time type of person. For me, I'm about words of affirmation. So he'll try to go do a ton of different things. And, that's just, I feel like I could do all for my own. There's the alpha female, right? I'm good, right? I could do that. I know how to change a tire. I know how to pump gas in my car. I know how to do all these things, right? I don't necessarily need you to do those, but that's the way he's going to deliver it to me. We were going different routes, right? And how we were trying to give love to each other and make each other feel like the king or the queen,
mm-hmm.
because we were doing it based on how we thought they wanted love
mm-hmm.
to be delivered.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until that communication happened where it was like, listen, I love the fact that you feel like being a king. Oh, actually, this is a good example of your question. I was like, I love the fact that you feel like you need to pump my gas. One of the things I loved about my husband, one of the first times we started dating, one of those first times I'd probably say, I was like, I think I need to marry that guy. We went to church together.
Mm-hmm.
We drove in separate cars. We were still dating. And we both left. And I was like, okay, see you later. We were both driving. And I veered off to go into the gas station. I was ahead of him a bit. I veered off to go into the gas station. He recognized I went into the gas station. He turned around, came to the gas station, and came to pump the gas in my car. And at that moment, I was like, okay, that's
ding,
different.
ding,
I've
ding,
never
ding, ding.
experienced that. Like, but okay.
Right.
And I will tell you, for the many years that we have been together,
mm-hmm.
I could not tell you how. I probably on one hand could count how many times I pumped gas over 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've never taken my car to get fixed.
Mm-hmm.
That's a shop. Right. Never touched it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that those are things that he wants to do,
mm-hmm.
because that's what makes him. But I also know I could do them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I know where the Toyota dealership is. I know where the dealership is.
Yes.
Like, I'm good. But I know that is what he needs to feel like he's taking care of me.
Mm-hmm.
So I let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I could do it, but I let it go. So it's a simple example, but it's an example to say you just have to understand what it is
mm-hmm.
that he wants to deliver to feel that way. And even though you can do it, you got to let it go.
Yeah. So my last thing, right? Because we have like almost 1 minute. Like balance. How did you find that balance? I know through all the the years you've been married, and I think it's been like almost 10 years, all the years you've been married, but balance. It seems like you the communication thing. So what I've heard you say, because I just want us to end on this. So I heard you say CSC, right? Communication, support, and counseling, right? And then I also heard you say you gotta let him be a man, and you have to just be mindful of that all the time. And whatever that might be for you, you have to communicate that before you let him be a man too, right? You can't just say, I'm gonna let him be a man and do this. Hey, what makes you feel like him? Oh, I like doing this for you, Blase Skip. And then you have to say it and remind yourself, right? But how did you find that balance? And you got about 30 seconds to tell our listeners, how did you find that balance with all this stuff to kind of like get to that place? I know it's a learning process.
It's really just, it's trial and error, right?
Okay.
It's talk about it, try it out. If it works, do it. If it doesn't, talk about it, fix it. Talk about it, try it out. If it works, do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't, fix it. Talk about it, try it out. If it works, it's like literally, that's it.
Right. Okay.
Right. It's a partnership, and you guys continuing to work and figure that out, and don't give up.
Right.
Right.
So with all that too, I also just want to add, like, I think that the one thing that is important is trust. And I think with all the things that you're talking about, you have to trust somebody. So that means you have to get rid of the waste and the issues and the problem that you had before, so that you can get to the place to do the CSC. right? To get to the communication, support, and counseling, because those are behaviors and things you spoke about that you're already whole when you're coming to the situation. This is the Brother to Brother Show. Thank you, Nicole, for being with us, and I'm sure you'll be on other podcasts with us. So thanks. Please know we love you. Work with us, be with us, and know we're coming from the heart. This is the Brother to Brother Show.